Welcome to the Islamic Library Association. We are dedicated to showcasing Muslims' rich contributions to literature and society while advocating for accurate representation and equity in libraries. Hello and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khalisah Harris. I am a librarian and the founder of the Islamic Library Association. Through this work, we advocate for equity in libraries and public spaces, ensuring accurate representation of Muslims while highlighting the incredible contributions Muslims have made and continue to make in the literary landscape. This channel serves as a space to celebrate and amplify Muslim voices, recognize the contributions of Muslims to the library profession, and promote the diversity of perspectives within the literary community. Today, we are here with Asma Hussein. Asma is the owner of Ruqaya's Bookshelf, a Muslim publishing company named after her daughter. Her love of writing for both children and adults motivated her to create a platform where Muslim authors could tell their stories beautifully and authentically. She is also an author of some of your favorite children's books. Thank you so much for joining us today, Asma. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
No problem. We are happy that you are here with us today to tell us about your journey as a Muslim publisher and author. Let's go on ahead and just get right into it. Can you tell us um, how you became an author and a publisher, and which came first?
So, an author definitely came first, becoming an
Mhm.
author. I think because my love for this work really stems from my love for writing. And it actually all started with one book called Bismillah Soup. It was like authors will tell you they don't often get these lightning strike ideas. So a lot of times they'll have like a little bit of an idea and they have to really tinker with it and go through it. But for Bismillah Soup, it was just this lightning strike idea. And that was in 2014. And I remember thinking, oh, I've never seen a book like that. I want to write that book. And then I wrote the draft in one sitting, beginning to end, and I'm like, "This is such a good." Obviously, I'm biased because it's my own writing, but I'm like, "This is such a cool story, such an interesting story." And obviously, I had people look at it and kinda, go through some of those, like, edits and all that, but when it came to publishing, I very quickly realized, like, within maybe 1 month of trying to send it out and, I did so much research about, what was kinda like the Canadian publishing landscape. Even some American publishers, I was submitting, and then it became abundantly clear to me that the barriers to entry were so high, and not to say that the book wouldn't eventually get to the place where it needed to, but I felt like it would take years. It would take multiple years and me constantly pushing and pushing and pushing just for this story, and I had another one as well, just for them to get to a point where someone's looking at them. Not even, publishing them, or if it got to that state of being published, I had this feeling that like, oh, they're going to try to edit this. They're going to try to take some of the identity out of this. They're going to try to take some of the religion out of this, which was important for me. And I just got to a point, I think I was just very stubborn. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going through years and years of struggle in order for my work to eventually be watered down. I didn't want that. So that was in 2014. In 2015, Rukaiya's Bookshelf was established, and that was kind of, I guess it's been 10 years now. Um, that was our first step into publishing.
It's a beautiful story. Also, slightly, it's unfortunate as well, that
It is.
but that's why we're here, and that stubbornness counts. It matters. It got you here thus far.
Stubbornness can be useful sometimes.
Yes, or maybe persistence,
Yeah.
whichever word you want to use, but it got you where you are this far, and it has been
No.
great, mashallah, despite the barriers.
Alhamdulillah.
So there are a few other Muslim publishing companies. What makes Rukaya's bookshelf unique compared to those?
Well, that's a tough question because there are a lot of amazing publishing companies coming up actually, and not just coming up that have existed even before Ruqayya's bookshelf. Um, for me, my focus is really fiction.
Okay.
Not to say that we'll never branch out into nonfiction, but my focus is fiction. It's storybooks with Muslim protagonists who are doing just fun, interesting things, right? My goal is not necessarily to impart knowledge, like spoon feed knowledge, but it's to weave in identity and celebration of our faith, our families, our communities, and do it in a way where kids will keep coming back to those books because it's almost like they don't even really know what's happening. They don't like it's not just like it's not instructional,
Mhm.
it's just a book that is enjoyed and read many, many times over. And I've heard from parents all over who are like, send me pictures of the books that are like so worn and torn, and they have to go back and rebuy them actually because they're like, listen, my kid has been asking for this bedtime story for the past like 6 months. And I'm like, you know what? My goal has been reached then. My goal has been I would consider that a successful book because the child themselves is wanting to pick it up and read it.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about the books that walk us through the process of how you create a new book from idea to publication? So you did say how you have, the lightning strike moments. But what about when you have a more planned and, detailed process? What does that look like for you?
It's funny because I actually haven't published a children's book by me for some time.
Okay.
Um, I would love to, and I have a bunch of manuscripts just sitting on my desk, like on my computer, and they're all. I'm every few months I open them and tinker with them. But my goal really is to publish Muslim authors in general, and so manuscript submissions are open, have been open for a few years. Um, so we get manuscript submissions. We get a lot of manuscript submissions. They go through kind of a filtering process where there are people on the team who read through them and then kind of send me the ones that they feel have the most promise. And then I filter them as well. There are multiple filtration processes, I guess.
Okay.
Once I look at a manuscript, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool, interesting manuscript. I love unique ideas. I love warm stories. I love stories that are written by insiders in that community.
Okay.
So communities that I don't have access to
Mm.
as, not just as a Muslim, right? But as an Arab, as, somebody from North America. Like I'm not an insider in many other Muslim communities. So I love to read stories written by the people who actually live in those communities and have those experiences. So those are kind of some of the things I'm looking for. But they come to me. I pick up the phone. I have a conversation with the author. We go through edits. Once we decide, okay, we're going to. Is this too detailed, by the way?
No,
Because
I'm
I could
loving
talk
it.
about this for a long time. But then we talk a little bit about edits. We sign an agreement, and then their story goes to an editor. And then the editor will work one-on-one with the author and take the story from manuscript all the way to kind of like print ready text. And once it's there, then we start looking for an illustrator. The illustrator we hire has to kind of go with the vibe of the story. These are all artistic decisions, right? So if the story is a little bit like sillier, I like to have kind of like a little odd, fun, funky, illustrations. If it's more serious, it's a different vibe, the color scheme. It's it's kind of awesome. Honestly, this is like where I love to do the work because it's so creative and it's just so I've gotten to a point where when I read a manuscript, I can already imagine what the illustrations would look like. And so I'm like, yeah, you know what, that manuscript, yeah, it's gonna work with this illustrator. Like it's getting to that point. I mean, there's always room for improvement. But it goes to the illustrator, and then that process takes a few months in and of itself because illustration, obviously, it's a lengthy process. When it's done, the amount of eyes that have to be on it so you can, like, check mark, like, "Yes, it's done." There are a lot. Um, and still we're not perfect. So
Mhm.
sometimes when a book is printed, I look at it and I'm like, "Ah, I missed that one mistake." But you know what? We're human. We're we're not perfect. We're still a very small operation.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, alhamdulillah, it really is a really fun process. And then the book goes off to the printers. They print it. That's a whole process in and of itself. It comes, it's on the website, ready to buy.
Yes. That's an amazing process, but also,
Alhamdulillah.
like the average typical, publishing world, but you mentioned something. You mentioned pretty much about, ensuring that you have diverse, authentic stories.
Mhm.
So why is it important to you for Muslim children to see themselves represented in their stories?
I think for their sense of self growing up, like I can only like my experience growing up, I didn't see myself in books. I think maybe I had one or two books and they were kind of, from overseas and they
Mhm.
were very, they're always instructional books. They weren't me seeing someone that looks like myself or someone that looks like my mom or dad or siblings or like anything to do with who we actually were. And like it got to a point where like I didn't see myself in anything. Not books, not movies, not shows. And if I did see myself, it was always a negative representation, not positive. And so it almost feels like I'm a salmon swimming against the current, trying to hold on to my identity, but just really struggling because there's nothing around me that actually supports my identity. Everything is pushing in the opposite direction. And so there's a certain resilience that you have to have
Mm,
to keep going. And it's
definitely.
not that I don't want our children to have resilience. I want them to have resilience, but I don't want it to be so hard.
Yes.
I want them to see themselves in a celebratory light. Not just representation is good, but
Mhm.
also celebration, right? Like it's like it's this distinction between tolerance, like, oh, we should be tolerant. I don't believe in that. I think I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be celebrated. You know what I mean? And I want children to feel like they are celebrated. And so I'm hoping that that swim against the current just gets weaker so that this the swimming won't be as hard. That like to instill a sense of confidence and just joy in their identity.
Definitely. That is a beautiful analogy, a salmon swimming against the current. Like, please put that on a t-shirt.
Wait, I gotta write that down. No, I'm just
Yes,
kidding.
write it down. But you are a parent.
Yes.
You have a daughter, and you're you understand how you grew up. Reflecting, you think back that you didn't see yourself and things like that. But in today's world, for the young children, how do you think that the books that you provide help parents raise children with that confidence, but also with softness and joy? Not the instruction and the tolerance types of things that you and I may have both experienced, but how would we
Mhm.
do it differently for our children?
I think just the presence of a parent reading to a child a beautiful, fun, funny, bright book, it speaks for itself. Like, I think that a lot of times as parents, we have this notion that, like, "I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to do this in order to achieve," in order to raise my child. Actually, you just have to sit down with them and read a book and have that warm connection, the connecting moment with your child. And there's some I don't even have to talk about it. There's research based on, the connection between parent and child when they spend a certain amount of time per day reading, a certain amount of time one on one. There's a warmth and there's a trust that's built in families. And it doesn't always have to be Muslim books, right?
Yes.
It can just be beautiful books. I mean, the having Muslim characters and seeing representation is the added bonus, I think, is like it takes it up a notch. But that warm, closeness of a family, I think that is kind of the number one parenting. I don't wanna call it a tip. That's such a weird thing to say, but it's how you parent is to establish that closeness with your child, right? And for me, in my personal experience with my daughter, reading books to her was like our thing. You know,
Yes.
she's always loved books. And so it was just our thing. She's older now, so she's not gonna sit with me and read a book. But that was just like the thing to do. And it was like, you hold your child close and you read them that book, and that's all you need.
Yes. So, how has your community of readers and parents influenced the work that you do today?
So I do have people, like the community has definitely influenced the work.
Mhm.
Even if it's just from a business perspective, in that I can see what books tend to do well and what
Okay.
books are not necessarily doing the best.
Mhm.
So just from a statistical point of view, like what books are in demand and then what books are, I wouldn't say not in demand, but has a little bit less of a demand,
Okay.
right? So when I do events in person, I see how kids react to certain books,
Mhm.
right? And I see how parents react to certain books, and it's not always the same.
True. Oh,
Parents like certain books and kids like certain books. But at the same time, as somebody, so I don't like to look at myself as just a business person, who's just making business decisions,
mm,
like who's determining rather the content that I produce based solely on business decisions. So
mhm,
I'm going to produce this book because I know it's going to make money. I'm not about that life. I've never been, like, I know that there are certain books that are like really catchy and that parents tend towards, like, in the couple of weeks like leading up to Ramadan, everyone wants Ramadan books,
mhm,
right? Nothing wrong with that. We have some Ramadan books, are beautiful, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't just want to publish Ramadan books. I think there's so many other things that I could capture in books that families and children need. And like that just create that vibe and that atmosphere of identity and celebration, even if parents don't know yet that they need those
mhm.
books. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm kind of working in the background of just like, hey, I would love to publish a book about this. Do I have market research to support that? No, but it's an important topic and it's an important story. So let's push forward and hope that the community kind of catches up.
Nice. So, are any of the books that you've authored or published, are they available in any public libraries?
So there are some available in some in
Okay.
some public libraries, some in some.
Mhm.
I think, um, I think it depends on the library system. I know that, for example, in Canada, a patron can go to the library and, request books, and then some library, like heads of libraries, whether it's the executive director, if they have a discretionary fund and they know that their community, there are Muslims in their community, perhaps they'll do some research and find out like, okay, there is a Muslim publisher here, and let's get some books. But it's sporadic. It really is like up to one person in one library somewhere who decides, "You know what? I wanna do this and I have a couple of $100 to
Yeah.
spend." Um, the I would love for it to be widespread, right? That just to be known that we need to represent Muslims, we need to, incorporate, not just Muslims, but like I personally have not seen a lot of Muslim books in libraries. When I visit libraries, when I visit the children's section, I haven't seen very many. So I don't think it's just Ruqaya's bookshelf. I think it's everyone is kind of in the same boat. You know
Yes.
what I mean? I would love for libraries to carry my books. I would absolutely love it. And one of the reasons actually is to make it more accessible
Yes.
to children and families, because I know that not everybody can go to my website and spend $100 getting a stack of it's just not possible for, I would say, the majority of families, especially now, it's like financially it is heavy, and I don't want to get to a place where only families that are like upper middle class can afford books in their home. Everyone should have access to books.
The same way we have access to books that don't look just like us, those same people should have access to books that represent Muslims. So it's the
Yes.
same concept, it's a disservice to everyone to not have representation of Muslims in public spaces where we have
Absolutely.
access to other people. but people don't have access to us,
Yes.
especially from an authentic place. So
Yeah.
it's very important to have books such as yours that you've either authored and published, should be available. So you mentioned how some libraries, you specified more on Canada's side on how, there may be a discretionary fund, and they may collect some books that have Muslim representation in it. But within America specifically, I know there's a lot of similarities across the board, across throughout the world, actually, when it comes to Muslim representation in libraries. So, with that, what specific challenges have you faced with getting your books in those libraries? I know you're saying there's certain, some may have, but for the ones you haven't gotten into, were there any statements or any information that lets you know why your books are not available nationally?
Nope. No statements made. No. I think it's just a lot of silence, you know, and a lot of not knowing.
Mhm.
I think that it would be very hard for them to make a statement as to why they wouldn't carry the books, because
Mm.
then they're making a statement. You know what I mean? It becomes a public statement. It becomes a liability almost. I think the non-action, right? Because in my mind, libraries should be proactive, right? Like it should not be a stagnant system. Like with how fast our world is changing, libraries and librarians are, in my mind, meant to be proactively searching and like bringing in what the community needs, right? And so even just the silence, it kind of speaks loudly
Yes.
to me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then there are different barriers to entry depending on what library system you're in. So, if you, for example, go into the Toronto Public Library and request books, there are physical forms that you have to fill out, and you have to have a library card in that system, right? So, me as a publisher, I can't just go into different library systems and like put in requests. Like it has to come from somebody within that, like who's a patron of that library. It's a physical form, or at least it was from what I remember. Like there are just different there are different barriers to entry at every turn, and I think there was a point at which I thought, "You know what? Let me just try to get straight to parents."
Okay.
Because these systems are very difficult to get into. These systems are very like, it kinda feels like you're navigating a minefield, and, like, every time you think you're about to get somewhere, the door kinda shuts in your face, and I just got to a point where I'm like, "You know what? Let me just get this straight to parents." Let me make it as easy as possible for them to have access to the books, and then hopefully things will kinda the trickle down theory?
Yeah.
Um, I don't necessarily believe in it, but, like, at some point, maybe another few years down the road, um, people will or, like, libraries will be more in tune with, "Okay, let's be proactive," right? But I myself, as one individual small publisher, can't necessarily change an entire system, but I can produce the content, and I can try to get it to the people I need to get it to.
Perfect. But that's an amazing thing to be able to understand the barriers, well, acknowledge the barriers that you see and don't let those hold you back. That resiliency kicks in and you have continued doing what you're doing. But for myself as a librarian, that's where the Islamic Library Association came from. I'm not the only Muslim librarian. There are other librarians that um, would love to have Muslim representation in their libraries because they're on the front line and they see the Muslims that come into their libraries. And even if not a lot of Muslims frequent a specific library, again, today's world where we're global, we have access at our literally at our fingertips. So why would anyone's library only have a specific group of people, as if everyone's just clustered in their own little town, as if no one has access to the internet, to the news, to all these things. But that's the whole
Yeah.
point. We have access to people who are saying who we are.
Yeah.
And then there's books of Muslims getting to say who they are, their own authentic voices. So how is it that voices against Muslims can get into libraries, but Muslims stating who they really are not? It's a form of gatekeeping when libraries, make the statements that they are making is that they're equitable, diverse, inclusive, and accessible. But
Yes.
to who? But to whom? So it doesn't sound like they're accessible to Rukaiya's bookshelf. They're
It's
not.
interesting too. Like I was saying, like, librarians and libraries should be proactive and should be doing research. A quick Google search is gonna it's not just gonna bring Ruqayya's bookshelf up. It's gonna bring other Muslim publishers up. It's gonna bring Muslim authors up. It's actually not that hard to access. And so if it's not hard to access, that really begs the question, why aren't they, getting in touch? Why are they kind of ignoring emails do you know what I mean? Like there has to be something else there. There has to be and I don't want to assume, right? I'm not going to assume. But like perhaps they've always done things a certain way and it's very hard for them to break out of that. But again, we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a completely different world now. And it's almost to a point where I think like libraries need to catch up.
It's
Yeah.
so it's not an assumption. It's reality that there's policies that are
Yeah.
in place, and whether let's say they've had it from the beginning of time. Okay, like I can say it's not even specifically geared towards Muslims, but libraries still use the Dewey Decimal System.
Wow.
Um, for institutions that's claiming equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, using the Dewey Decimal System is the complete opposite of that. That has nothing to do with religion. That is a completely biased system. It was
Well,
created in a biased and prejudiced manner. So how is the institution going to be equitable and inclusive and accessible and diverse using a system that doesn't really even encourage that? So to answer your question is not an assumption. It's policies put in place from that biased and prejudiced perspective. That was the origin of libraries in America. So, I mean, even if you go back into the people who were not allowed to read, this is all stemming from literature,
wow.
knowledge, education, research. And that's what libraries are today, just like the schools. So you have all these things. There's many barriers. It's not only the public libraries, we go into school libraries, we can go on and on and on, where books such as yours should be, because there's Muslim children in the libraries, there's Muslim children in the schools, there's Muslim children at the bookstore. We're part of these communities. So that's
Yeah.
where the Islamic Library Association comes in to be that place to help impact the policies positively to where we can see positive and accurate representation of Muslims opposed to the opposite, opposed to the opposing voice that are oftentimes outright anti-Islamic. And then that's when decisions are made biasly when the only literature they see is anti-Islam, and then the policies are very, very supportive of Islamophobic ideas
Mm, I
because
see.
there's no way that you can only have one voice but not the other side of that same conversation.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot, and, that resiliency that you talked about as an author, as a publisher, myself as a librarian, it takes all of us together. Like you said, there's multiple Muslim publishing companies if you looked it up. So it's not about we're saying, "Hey, libraries, give us some books." No, we're saying, "We have books, include them."
Yes.
So I
It
think what
it
you're doing is amazing. Just It's great work, and don't give up. Keep going, keep pushing, keep
I'm not
striving.
giving
It's
I'm that sa when you were describing, all the policies in place, I'm like, "Okay, it sounds like we all have to be those salmon, and we all at the
Mhm.
same time have to be battling that current." It can't just
Yeah,
be one person, it can't just be one publishing company or 5 or 10. It has to be it almost has to be like a grassroots community effort that
definitely.
we have to, insist and insist and insist.
Yeah.
that our books need to be in these public libraries. Our books need to be in these spaces that are accessible to us and to other kids too. Because to your point, it's not just about Muslim kids, although that my goal has always been to cater to Muslim children just because we've had so little in the past. It is getting it's getting a lot more now, which is amazing, but that's been my goal. But in reality, it shouldn't just be for Muslim children. Any child should be able to pick up one of our books. I'm looking here because I have a huge pile of my books here. Any child should be able to pick up any number of books so that they can kinda have access to a community that's different than theirs, a belief system that's different than theirs, like, cultures and, like, just experiences that are so far removed from theirs. That's how we grow as individuals, that's how we grow as human beings. When I was young and I would read books, I wasn't reading books about Muslims. I was reading books about everyone else because that's what was available. I was reading books about characters who didn't believe what I believed, who often did things that I wouldn't do, but it also opened my eyes to a lot of different possibilities and communities, and it made me understand people. And why shouldn't non-Muslim children and families have access to Muslim literature in order for that kind of dialogue to happen as well?
Definitely. So, I mean, it's very broad and vast, yet still very specific. It's just because even if, okay, we say Muslim representation, well, like you said, there's different types of cultures. Muslims are across all races, all cultures. So it's not like, oh, I read this one Muslim book. That's all the Muslims. No. I mean, even to your point, what you said earlier, that you try to select manuscripts from authors from different Muslim communities. So the word diverse with Islam, that's diverse.
Yes,
So,
very,
it's not one
very
Muslim, is going to just be the token Muslim book, and that's pretty much what we have now is just a few books scattered in, and they just become forms of tokenism, which actually ends up solidifying stereotypes
yes,
and still dismissing other groups of Muslims, or other cultures within Islam or other races of Muslims or however you want to look at it. But it's a reality. And then when you're talking about the accessibility for all the children, that word equity, to me, equity is a child can go into the library, close their eyes, and choose a book. The odds are the same to get anybody.
yeah,
That's equity. Not, oh, we have to set this one book up. Here's this one book. Let's we're gonna just show this one off.
yeah,
Or you might not even be lucky enough to find it because it's just lost in that sea of books.
yeah.
So, with all that you're doing, despite the odds, what are your hopes for the future of Rukaiya's bookshelf?
I mean, that's a big question because I have a lot of different hopes. But I really do hope that we can, like, every year that passes, we can publish more and more stories, and just flood the market with diversity inside of diversity. You know what I mean? Like, I love the idea of just representing as many different communities as possible. But just I would love, not just for Ruqayya's bookshelf, but for other Muslim authors and for other Muslim publishers to flood the market so that a child can look and be like, I don't know which book to pick because there are so many. When you go to the library and there's like 30 books about Christmas, a kid is gonna be like, I don't know which one to pick. There are I have so many options, right?
Mhm.
And as we do that, as we flood the market with so many options, it forces us as writers, as publishers, to just get better and better and better, right? To produce works and books that are just better and better and better so that they can, stand out. And it's interesting because we're already starting that, right? So something that was published 15, 20 years ago versus something being published now, you can already see that we are kind of climbing that ladder and making sure that our work is as beautiful and polished as it can possibly be. And this is, I hate to say this, but like in competition with publishers that have existed for 100 years, you know what I mean? Who have
Yes, I do.
millions, if not billions of dollars behind
Mhm,
them, and
mhm,
we're just like 2 or 3 people individually sitting at a desk, like click clacking on our laptops and and hoping that we can produce books that are, going to kind of be as good, right? And we're getting there. Like I truly like I see not just Rukai's bookshelf. I have to say this so many times because I see so many authors and publishing companies like bringing out books that I look at them like, "Oh, I would have never seen this 10 years ago. This is beautiful." So
yes,
you're already seeing it in the community, but essentially, I want our books to be like in schools, just like Scholastic is in schools.
yep, mhm,
I want every school to have, our books and other Muslim books as well, whether it's Islamic school or public school. I want public
definitely.
libraries to have every public library system should have books that people can go be like, "You know what? I'm gonna put that on hold. I want that." And I want the circulation to be high for those books and for them to actually be displayed. I want the books to be in bookstores like Barnes& and Noble and just be as accessible as possible that anybody, whether they have $10 to spend or $0 to spend, can pick up a book and absorb it. That's what I want.
That's it's good that you mentioned. I'm happy you brought this up, talking about books being in the school libraries and things like that. Um, but have you noticed a lot of the Islamic schools, the parents, they're paying for private tuition for their child to go into an Islamic school, and that Islamic school still does not have access to books that represent the Muslims. So parents are paying for their children for private school education and still have to pay additionally for books, opposed to, as a librarian, the schools come in grade levels, the whole second grade, then the next day the whole third grade, and they come and get piles and piles of books for parents who should send their children to school for free. And that's not the issue. I'm just making a point
Yeah.
of that child goes to school for free and can still come to the library and get books that represent them for free,
Yeah.
where the Muslim children and the Muslim families are so disadvantaged and so underrepresented that even in trying to get representation and allowing your child to have more of an Islamic cultivation in their educational learning, you still, in those environments, do not have the fun fictional books
Yeah.
that displays their lifestyle. And that's most times part of what the parents' goals are for even putting them in Islamic schools. So I say all that to say it's essential, and where libraries at this current time are minimizing and actually borderline dismissing Muslims as students, as children, as patrons, as these books have to be available and accessible to everyone. And so even for
Right.
the Muslims who are in public school, okay, so a lot of their classmates are not going to be Muslim. So why wouldn't they want to read a book about their friend? Why wouldn't they
Absolutely.
be able to see their friends in the literature and books that they have available, that are available and accessible to them, which is normally school libraries, whether it's public school or Islamic schools, whether it's their public library, you know, that. And to your point, Muslims have more than just children's books as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but the
I can identify so many of our books that any child can pick up and enjoy.
yes,
The first one that popped into my head was the book called There Was an Old Auntie Who Swallowed a Samosa. And it's just like the setting is, it's kind of based off of There Was an Old Woman Who Swallowed a Fly. Not exactly, kinda. It's a samosa instead of a fly. It happens like in a mosque instead of somewhere else. But any child can pick that story up and it is hilarious and it is fun and the illustrations are fun and like anytime I read that book to a group of kids, like they're all just like doubled over in laughter and it's so silly and fun. Like any child can enjoy that story. Any child. You know
definitely.
what I mean? And so that's another piece of it that like it's not just for the Muslim community. It's for everyone. And
Yeah.
and our communities at large are going to get stronger and more appreciative, not tolerant. I hate the word tolerant.
Yeah.
More appreciative and more lean into celebrating just everyone.
Yes.
And like that sense of we live in scary times, right? So anything we can do to soften, our relationships with one another is so important. And I feel like starting with that younger generation, starting with kids who are still learning, who are still developing their identities is really just that's where you start. That's where
Yes.
you have to start.
So speaking of those young children, what impact do you hope your work has specifically on the next generation of Muslim children?
It's funny because I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago where I read this story. Remember at the beginning of this interview, I said I had like one or two books. One of them I remember was a story like ages ago from when I was a kid, and it was about a girl whose parents didn't celebrate her birthday. Whether you believe in celebrating birthdays or not
Mhm.
is irrelevant. But when I had my child, I was an adult, fully formed frontal lobe adult. When I had my child, when it came time to celebrate her birthday, my mind went, "Remember that book?" And then but, like, I never thought that my mind would go back to a book that I read as a young child. But the way in which the books we read as 4, 5, 6-year-olds follow us in terms of our thoughts and beliefs and, like, beliefs about ourselves, but beliefs about others is actually kinda nuts. There are some tangible goals, but there's a lot of just intangibles that, like, you will not be able to put your finger on. That in 50 years, right, if there are 10,000 people who, their grandmas and their moms read a book, about whatever, and that informed the way that they talk to their kids, celebrate their kids, what they teach them. That all of that is intangible.
Yes,
And
definitely.
that's like that makes me really excited. It makes me feel like the work that I do, the work that we do, it doesn't end at one generation. It can potentially, may God, allow us to accomplish this. It can impact generations to come without even if a book is out of print in 10 years.
Mhm.
People read that in 10 years, and how many people how many parents is that going to inform, when they're raising their kids and grandkids and stuff? It's always just, like, stored at the
Yeah.
back of your mind, and so the power of all of this just, like, spreading beyond belief is, um it's just amazing.
You're ultimately saying it's not just the next generation, it's generations to come with that frontal lobe
Yeah.
going back in time. And but that's good. I mean, that if that's your hope, then that's your hope, and I
That's
believe that you will accomplish that goal, inshallah, definitely. I mean,
inshallah.
the books are impactful regardless. You don't have to only be Muslim. Uh, but if you could share one message with parents and young readers, what would it be?
It would be keep reading, get your hands on as many beautiful books as you possibly can. As parents, I think having books that celebrate your child's identity is so important. Like we live in a world, I said this before, we live in a scary world,
Mhm.
and we need to give our children as many tools as they can possibly carry to be confident in who they are, And I think this just put them on a path of reading and consuming books that are beautiful and books that are going to impact who they are as they grow up.
Lovely. So, if you could share one message with librarians and library institutions, what would that be?
Buy our books. You said one message, 3 words,
Right.
buy our books.
Okay. Okay.
No, but honestly, like, if your goal is to be inclusive and equitable, then be inclusive and equitable, or don't
Okay.
claim to be. Don't claim to be inclusive and equitable unless you're actually willing to put in the work.
Mm, very, very well said.
Thank you.
I think that is a perfect place to wrap this up. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I would just like to add, I really appreciate your work, and I can't wait to see what you accomplish in the next year or 2 or 5. I'm very, very excited. Inshallah.
Well, thank you likewise. Your work, I hope that it continues to flourish and continues to be impactful
Mm.
for yourself, for it to be fulfilling, and as well as for the readers, the authors, for everyone. What I'm doing could only be done if there's people like you doing what you do.
And
So,
vice versa.
it's it's a collective effort, to try to ensure that, and we have to do it. As Muslims, we have to advocate for our needs and our interests within the literary world. And we're doing that. And I definitely look forward to staying abreast of the things that you have coming up because it's going to be continuous because we have all these Muslim authors. And hopefully you get to publish many, many more amazing books. And we will definitely be in touch, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Join the Islamic Library Association, and together we can shape a more inclusive future for literature.